everyone. MCO is a huge thing which stands for multi-club ownership. Today we have Jason, who is the expert on this and who knows everything about multi-club ownership. Jason, glad to have you. Just introduce yourself.
Yeah, hi. I wouldn't say I know everything about multi-club ownership, but thanks for the quick intro. Yeah, so my name is Jason Stevens. Been around in the football industry for about 30 years. The last 5 or 6 years, sort of like high focus on multi-club ownership and the structures and the players in the space. And then probably the last 2 years, we've been acting as a consultant, working with clubs, leagues and other entities that have an interest in the game. Just advising them on current players and their trends and the current trends, what's going on in this space of multi-club ownership.
Thank you, Jason. So first thing you said that you've been in this, niche for around last 5 years, right?
Yeah. Sort of analyse the market, the environment's probably a better word for it. And clubs, early players, which we can go back to Red Bull being the first real significant group. There was some other players before that. Actually, one of the first entities in Europe was a group called ENIC. ENIC are the owners of Tottenham Hotspur. And before they took over Tottenham, they had a network of clubs in the late 90s. And those clubs included some big names. They had Rangers, AEK Athens, Basel themselves, and Tottenham themselves. And yeah, I mean, it was strange at the time, but the governance of the leagues didn't allow owners to have multiple clubs, and it was just a blatant flatline. If you had a stake in another club that competed in a European competition, you wasn't allowed to be a club owner of a club in the Premier League. So back then, Daniel Levy and Joe Lewis, they had to sell their stakes in the other clubs in order for them to gain control of Tottenham. So, but it's moved on since then. Red Bull obviously set a trend, and then obviously lots of entities started to dabble in this space, and now we've got probably around about 400 clubs involved in multi-club ownership across the globe now.
Wow, and great that you've mentioned the history when the multi-club ownership became a thing.
When I was going to say the first, I mean, there's evidence of people owning two clubs of different lower leagues, probably back in the 80s. But I'd say the first significant group was ENIC, and again, it becomes significant because they were the first two to really test the rules of European competition, where they had two teams, AEK Athens and Prague in Czechoslovakia, both qualified for UEFA Cup at the time, and obviously the rules prevented them from competing in that competition, but they took it to court and they actually won a landmark ruling, but at the same time UEFA come back with another ruling which questioned integrity. As a result, they wasn't allowed to compete. But then what we saw after that was, like I mentioned before, the ENIC group come in. They wanted to take over Tottenham Hotspur in the Premier League. They already had 5 clubs. And then the Premier League said no. So as a result, they sold all their stakes in the other 5 clubs in order to take over Tottenham.
And talking about the periods after this holding, which companies have entered the Premier League and when has it happened?
Well, obviously, if we go back looking at first, I have actually got a timeline of this. If you just allow me to get my resource open, you caught me out here slightly.
Yeah.
But I will bring this up. So I'm going to guess that the first one was, I think, obviously Manchester City, right? Manchester City were the big one, but we have had Watford that have dipped in the Premier League. So it depends on what year. Now, obviously, Manchester City have been a mainstay in the Premier League. So you would say that Manchester City are the fixed presence, and they started to dabble in multi-club ownership from 2012. But when you've got Watford, who've always been partnered with their Italian club, and then they also had a brief spell in the early part of the tens with Granada in Spain as well, but they've had some, again, difficulties with the regulators, etc. over there. But bear with me. I'm going to go through the exact, because obviously now we've got a number of Premier League clubs that have links to MCOs. I think we're up to about 16 now that have got links. We call links either direct links or through club partnerships, etc.
Okay, interesting. So you mentioned that you do consultancy for, companies and ventures. What are the main markets, the most, best ones to enter right now, meaning geographically?
So, which are the best markets to enter as a multi-club owner? Did you say?
Yes.
Look, I don't. I mean, it depends what the motive is and what you consider to be the best entry. If you're looking at profit as your clear motive, then, I mean, yes, you could turn around and say, well, the Premier League's the richest league in the world, so therefore it makes sense to have a have a team in that league. But at the same time, if you're looking for a quick return of investment, i.e., to get you a bigger return, then maybe you just got to think further afield. But I look at leagues that are up and coming. You look at the difficulties that the French league is having at the moment with regards to its broadcasting rights, in terms of the difficulties it's having with fan engagement, infrastructure development. You'd say that probably the French league is on the verge of losing its top five status.
Mm-hmm.
So you've got to then look outside of which markets could potentially take its place, and then you could look at Portugal, you could look at Holland, but in themselves they've all got their own difficulties. For me, if you've got a multi-club, then you want to, part of that multi-club strategy has got to be your ability to move players about, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if you're moving players about, then you've got to look at the most effective corridors, and Portugal provides that. I would advise clubs to look at getting a club in Portugal. You've obviously got the connections to Europe, a lot of African countries, and then I would say because of the trade agreements they've got between UK and Portugal, it's easy to facilitate players over there because we don't have to have the governing body endorsement points so much now. So, I mean, you do, but there are rules around it now in terms of if you play young players with minutes, you can get around it, and then clubs are allowed one or two free transfers, i.e. they can bring players in from any market without necessarily licensing criteria. So I would say because of the rich pathway between South America and Portugal, the access from South American countries into Brazil, and then obviously Brazil's natural pathway to Portugal. We all know that's the busiest transfer corridor anyway in global football. So yeah, I would recommend Portugal as a European stay. And then it's about, where else? Where else would you build a multi-club model? Because it's not all centred around England, right?
Yeah.
You've got to look at what's happening in America with potentially the World Cup coming there in a couple of years' time, well, not even a couple, 18 months' time. And then the impact that's going to have on the ecosystem. We've already seen the massive development. I wouldn't say massive growth in the MLS, but you are seeing a development in the leagues below it, like the USL, etc., and the NWSL. And the grassroots popularity in America is significant. They're getting quite innovative with competitions with Mexico. So I would definitely look at trying to have some sort of footing in America as well. So for two clubs, I'd go North America, Portugal, and then if it's pure profit and money that you want, then look to get a club in England.
Interesting. When you advise people or when you're talking about it's good to have a club in Portugal or United States, what key factors do you basically approach and trying to understand if there is a good place to invest?
First of all, it's all about understanding the owner's motives. If you don't understand the motives, it's very hard to understand what they're trying to build. And then, there's got to be a vision that goes with the motive. Again, if you can understand the motives and the vision of the club and what they're trying to build, then you can identify potential places with synergies. And that question is very hard to answer unless I go into detail with a specific project. And unfortunately, the projects I'm advising on at the moment are still live, so I've got to obviously keep names away, but I'll try and define it by geographical location. So investors in America that have good ties to Africa are looking to build a free club model, one in Africa, one in North America, and then one in England. The motive is centered around player development, giving African players the opportunity, young African players the opportunity, and what they've identified is a tiered approach to their player development. So Africa to North America, then England. Now, the English club is not a high level club, it's a lower level club. So that step is progressive, because if it was a Premier League club from North America, then that step is going to be a little bit harder to bridge. But because it's a lower level club in England, then that step is reasonable. So again, you've got to have a look at the performance levels of the club, etc. So first of all, we just look to see whether or not your motive is player development. Okay, well, these are the pathways there. When you talk about player development, are you looking at getting the maximum return of player transfers, or are you just providing opportunity? So this particular group is just about providing opportunity. It's not necessarily to make a profit on trading. So therefore, there's other things that we need to look at. Advising clubs in England where there's big African communities, so they can develop naturally on and off the pitch, right? So we look at that, and it's the same with America. Where are the African communities there? So make sure that it all aligns. And then it's making sure that, with any investor, that there's a commitment to investing in the clubs, because it's okay having player development models, but you've also got to look after the natural talent that's coming through their own ecosystems, and you're not restricting that. Because there are rules and regulations for overseas players. You're not going to get a hatful in, but you can do it on a steady process. So it's making sure that they understand the rules and the regulations, because you'll be surprised. A lot of these people that come into buying clubs, whether it's individual or multi-club, they're not really football people. They have an understanding of what the game is, they understand business, but they don't understand football. And a lot of it, they just don't understand the rules and the regulations. It becomes a little bit of a surprise to them. Right? You can only move 2 players in from this country. I wanted to bring a whole team in, but you can't. So you have to do that steadily. But then again, then look at leagues where you can do that. So for example, if the USL in America, they've got more flexibility and they can bring in 8, 9 overseas players. So that gives you another big footing in order to achieve that. So it's about making sure they understand the rules and the regulations, trying to align culture, vision and motives. And then, you build from there. And then it's about making sure they've got a plan of investment. They've done a proper environmental analysis, both internal in terms of within the club, and then external within the operating environment, so that they've got all the tools, the information to be able to build an effective model. But then the most important part is understanding the fan bases, because you've got to make sure you communicate effectively with them. Because as soon as you mention the word multi-club ownership, then certain fan groups, they get a little bit disgruntled because they fear that there's going to be a pecking order, and then I don't want my club to be second to anybody, because to a fan, their club's the most important thing. And then they want to know that their club's been treated equally, so they do make comparisons to the exact dollar spent in one club to the other club. So if you can communicate effectively throughout, make sure your vision, your philosophies, your ideas are presented, then I think you can get a better buy-in from the fan groups and other stakeholders.
Okay, and what are the main, types of investors you see right now in the market who are entering the multi-club ownership?
It's usually private equity or venture funds that are the big players. Venture funds where people raise money, and that could be hundreds of people that just want to put money into a sports project or a specific sports project, even women's football. And then they're not necessarily, they're not exactly influential. They're passive investors, and they decide when they want to exit, and then they have people managing the funds for them, and then those people build a team of experts around them to invest in the right markets. Private equity can be a mixture of institutional investment, or it can be individuals with significant wealth. And then what we are seeing is a lot of private equity companies now starting, well, not so much starting, what you've seen over the last few years. And I'll take Josh Harris, for example. Now, he was part of Apollo Global Management, and they're one of the biggest asset-based companies on the planet. And then he co-founded that, but their remit wasn't sport. So then he's come away from that to form another company called 26 North. And what he's done, he's headhunted all the best sports people from around other funds, from like Goldman Sachs and other big entities, Blackthorns, and Carlyle, and he's brought them together for sports specific funds. And then they're starting to invest significantly. They've raised a lot of money quickly. So we're not really seeing them buy into a massive team yet, but that's on the horizon, because they've generated £3 billion in potential investment funds. So we will see that. So pretty much private equity and venture funds are the main, I would say, main people behind multi-club ownership models at the moment. But you're also getting, there is a percentage as well that is wealthy individuals. And if you look at Robert Platic, for example, he works for Dell's family office, and they're significant, one of the largest family offices on the planet. From his own personal wealth, he's now started to invest in football clubs, and he's tinkered with 3 already. He's exited 2, but he's still got Casapier in Portugal, and now he's just about to buy Reading in England. It can be a mix.
Okay, in terms of the goals that investors have, like what are the common goals if you could break down them by categories?
Listen, private
Yeah.
equity don't get involved unless they're making a return of their investment. And to a certain point, I agree with that, but I don't think it's a fast profit. I do think of it as, a lot of them are realising now that if you're investing in football, then it needs to be a longer game, like they would do in any industry if they was investing. So I think we are seeing investors now take the long-term approach between 7 and 15 years. But then again, it's a platform as well. It's a platform to increase in their own personal profiles. And we sort of saw that from, again, it wasn't through a multi-club ownership model, but Abramovich was the first real, I'd say, high-profile owner. He used to own Chelsea Football Club. And because he was quite private, he never really wanted to do interviews. He was, very rarely seen about. But because Chelsea were very successful, it created this intrigueness to who he was, and the public wanted to know him, industry wanted to know him, and then he saw that he got this indirect fame. He became one of the most popular men on the planet through football, through club ownership. And I think a lot of these investors, these owners now, have seen that actually, I'm not saying this is a primary motive, but their profiles are raising. And and I suppose when you're looking at what they do, they invest in clubs, they bring together communities, they invest in communities. It's a natural that people are going to want to know who's doing that, and obviously that comes with goodwill in return. So, a profile could be suggested as a motive as well. But there again, you could just say that some people have just got lots of money and they want a hobby. And therefore, I've got some sort of connection to the club, whether they grew up through that area or whether they just supported that club as a child, or whether they just enjoy that sport. And this was an opportunity that they couldn't refuse. So it really does depend on the individual, really. I don't think there's a blanket motive for any of them. But yeah, I would say that in most cases, they're not doing it for profit, because football tends to lose money more than it's making at the moment, although I have my doubts on that. When I look at it with the big brands, and I look at the Premier League, for example, the top 6 clubs are now turning over 500 to 700 million. There's a lot of incompetence out there if they can't make a profit by turning over that sort of money. So when they report an annual profit and loss of minus whatever, I'm dubious about it, because a lot of these football clubs have multiple bank accounts registered to the stadium addresses, and in those accounts there's a profit. And I just wondered if they just move money around more, and then this is another discussion, right? They move money about to appease the fans. People then look into that bank account, it sees a loss, then they don't have to justify high transfer spends. But anyway, multi-club ownership, bring that back into multi-club ownership, then that can help as well, because certain countries are not regulated financially. So therefore, you don't have to produce annual profit and loss accounts. Any money that club raises can be put into the main hub. In this case, Manchester City, they've got several clubs that don't have financial regulations, and they raise about 17% of their annual revenues from other clubs' revenues. So they use it for the Manchester City to make their profile look bigger. And it works because they can then spend more money in the transfer market. They can spend more money on their biggest asset, which is Manchester City.
Okay, and are you saying that you are thinking that most of these clubs are probably profitable, but just reporting their losses for, some benefits? Mm-hmm.
Yeah, again, I've got another data, a spreadsheet here. I'm just going to bring that up. So I've just been doing this, and not every club has released their profit and loss yet for 2023. I'm going to Yeah, so this is slightly veering off track, but if we just focus on the MCOs, right? I'd say Arsenal's an MCO, okay, because they've got their club in the MLS in Colorado. So the last 2 years, they've reported a combined loss of 69 million, but they've got 10 other associated companies and they've got 87.76 million in the bank of those other accounts. So I would say that they are making a profit. We look at the other one I would say is not making a profit is Aston Villa. I mean, they've reported a financial year of a loss of 120 million, and obviously they've got multiple accounts, but there's not that much money in them. Chelsea's a very complicated web, but combined, they've got 14 other companies. 8 of them, there's no financial information in there, but the rest, they've got a combined £269 million, what we call cash in the bank, and yet they're reporting a loss every year as well. I mean, I can go on through Crystal Palace. They reported a loss last year, 22, 23 or 34 million, but they've got 5 other companies associated and linked to the Crystal Palace, and they've got cash in the bank of 64 million, and it just goes on and on and on. I've got the whole list of it. So there is evidence to suggest that money is being moved around as well. And yeah, okay, it's another discussion for another day. But there is this massive psychology from fans, right? You expect your club to invest, especially in the Premier League, because they're quite integral to the transfer ecosystem. So fans expect their clubs to invest in players every year, and if they don't, it kicks up a stink, and fan groups get disgruntled. But if you show straight away that you lost a profit in your last annual accounts, then fans will go, okay, right, you're maximising the revenue. All right, just we want to see some investment soon. But actually, some clubs are moving money sideways without a doubt.
Okay, the last one I have for you is pretty interesting. How the sport club is making money? Like, which revenue streams they make most money? And let's say the Aston Villa or any Premier League club, what are they focusing mostly to make more?
Sorry, what multi-club ownership models or just football clubs in general?
I would say in general.
Well, I mean, obviously the 3 main revenue streams are broadcasting, match day, and then commercial. And that commercial could be split between sponsors or selling merchandise. I think, for clubs, when they're looking at creating new revenue streams, I think what we're seeing now is a significant investment into fan engagement parks. So they're trying to keep the fan, to develop the fan experience, the match day experience. They're trying to keep fans at the venues longer. Obviously, that's changed significantly because as soon as the match ended, big clubs wanted them out the stadiums as quick as possible, so they didn't have the responsibility of any potential trouble, incidents, etc. But now it's about no. They've come to your ground. How can we get the second pound out of them? So we are seeing now that clubs. Aston Villa have got a big fan engagement park being built. Manchester City have got a big fan engagement park being built. And other clubs are starting to, Newcastle considering how to build a fan engagement park, and they're starting to invest in those little areas. That's one way. Then it's about, what international globalization strategies have they got? And when you look at, I saw an interesting stat yesterday that there's 88 million Americans, which is bigger than the UK population, that enjoy watching the Premier League but don't have an affinity to any particular club. So in theory, the Premier League clubs have got 88 million customers to potentially tap into in America. So we are seeing this rush of clubs going out to America, whether it's on tours, developing their fan groups, creating collaborations, maybe investing in little clubs, whether that's like recreation, grassroots, etc., to try and entice a fan base into their brands. Because the English market, we're looking at that, it's quite saturated in the sense of we've got a lot of depth. We've got a lot of professional clubs in such a small space. So a lot of them probably have reached their ceiling. And there is a different emotional connection with the majority of the fan base in England, i.e., you tend to just support one club and you've got no danger of supporting another club. But that is changing. We are seeing now signs that with the younger generation, and we're talking about 11 to 16-year-olds, that they may actually support 2 clubs. They may support a player who represents another club, but enjoy watching that player, but also have affinity to a second club. We have got a society of split families, so mum may support one club, dad might support another club, and then they just feel like the children support both clubs because, that's mum and dad. So we are seeing the dynamics change in, how we support clubs. So, but the other day, ultimately, right, if we look at it, football clubs tap into any football fan, right? Any football fan. Because if you like football, then my challenge is as a club owner, as a business owner, is how can I get you to spend £1 on my club, even if you don't support it? So we've got to understand the mindsets of those fans to say, okay, come on in. Because, I know when I was growing up, I always wanted my football club to design a black football shirt, and they didn't do it for years and years. My club was Liverpool. And then they eventually done it, and it was like, yes, great. But in the meantime, other clubs did do it. I wouldn't buy a football shirt if it was an English football club, but if it was like a Barcelona, Real Madrid, or a PSG, or something like that, I bought the shirt because it was okay. It was okay to buy another club shirt outside of the country. So we are looking at that. How can we tap into other fans in order to generate them to spend? Then it's social media. We're all going for this craze for this OTT content, and then we are seeing documentaries come out. There is a demand from fans to see more behind the scenes, how the club operates, what the players do, what does training look like, what does preparation look like, all those things. And then, you go back to the match day, and now, you know what, I saw something the other day, it made me laugh. Now, clubs are starting to sell. When players get off the coach to enter a game, they're actually now selling spaces, and they're creating specific corridors where you could, as a fan, go and stand there and wait for your player, your famous player, to come off. And then there's an opportunity to potentially get a photo, to get a signed autograph. And they're selling those spaces. It's unreal. It's unreal. But saying that, there's no morals in England because they sell mascot places as well. So the little kid that walks out on the pitch with his idol, they're not doing that for free. A lot of clubs are charging big money for that as well. Every aspect of football has been commercialised, so and I think there's still more space. Wait for VAR. I think VAR will be the next one because all the eyes are on it, right, straight away. As soon as a goal goes in, everyone looks at that VAR. That's got to be a high moment where you could really market the arse out of that somehow. Do you know what I mean? But we haven't done it yet because I think there's still a perception that VAR is not 100% accepted. Whilst VAR is still seen as a negative, sponsors won't want to attach themselves to it. But as soon as it becomes accepted, as soon as VAR is part of the game, I think you'll see that VAR digital space. That will be the high value. That'll be the one that gets it. So there's a few areas there.
Okay, yeah, Jason. So we had a really interesting discussion, and covered the football. I will say from the top, not from the inside, but from the top, and it's a really interesting, episode. I'd love to ask you a couple more quick questions.
Yeah.
The first one, I will not ask you what is your favorite sport.
Sport.
Yeah.
I love all sports, but football does edge it.
Okay, who is your favorite player?
Well, do you know what? My team is Liverpool. I've had 30 years of winning, not much. Now we're in a little bit of a golden period. So started off, obviously, golden period, brainwashed by my parents, and then grew up. My ideal was John Barnes. I love John Barnes, the way he played, silky winger. We all wanted to be that player that danced round the whole team and then put it in the top corner. But yeah, he was my ideal when I was growing up.
Awesome. What is your favorite part of your job?
Oh, my job? I have several aspects really. I like education. I like creating trustworthy content. I think it's just, bringing that to the attention, bringing different thought angles to the table. I think allows other people to then become inquisitive and ask questions. I think it's important that there is a layer of information that is not put out to the general public in the sense of what really does happen underneath and what really are the connections and levels of influence. Now, we're never going to be able to measure levels of influence, but I think we can put enough information out there, we can gather that there is a level of influence being inflicted on certain bases. So for me, it's about providing new content, new information, new angles for people to be able to, do what they want with it. You know,
Okay, and what is the worst part?
research, because it's cross-checking. Because when you think you've got something, you can never ever be 100% sure that it is accurate, right? So you've got to cross-check it twice, three times. Then you find those reliable sources of information. But the hardest bit is trying to get clubs to provide some sort of acknowledgement that yes, this is true, this is not true, etc. Yeah, that's hard because you always want to try and make sure that you're giving a proper reflection. Not that I'm saying anything that's, you know, harm or reputational damage. It's
Mm-hmm.
not anything like that. But I want to get the percentages right for me. If I've got something that's incorrect and it's 10% out, 5% out, then to me that matters. For me, research is the hardest part because it's head in laptop, it's on the phone, networking, etc. It's trying to get that bit, and then it's making sure that once you've done it, check it, make sure you've checked it, don't make any shortcuts. And then
Mm-hmm.
you still get things wrong. I'd say that even all my content, I'd say it's probably 98% accurate, and there's always a couple. And what I love about what I'm doing and the network that I've built is that, I've had owners that message me privately and say, Jace, just a quick correction, it's only 37% or it's, 18% or whatever. And I love that. And so I try and make the quick edits as soon as I can so it's live and stuff like that. Because, yeah, some will say, I'm not a multi-club owner, but you've got 2, 3 clubs. Yeah, but I'm not a multi-club owner. They're all individual. Okay, it's great, but what can we do? Yeah, I mean, to be honest, listen, the first thing to say is that it's an education platform. It's an education thing that
Mm-hmm.
I do. It's not something that's gonna, man, it doesn't make you rich or anything like that. It's a hobby. It's something that I enjoy doing, something I enjoy researching, and if little things come off on the back of it, then great. If little projects come off at the back of it, then great. But it's not, my motive wasn't to turn this into a profitable business. It's not what I'm doing it for. If that was the case, then we've got the industry and there was a lot of work specifically around this space, then yeah, I welcome the opportunity. But yeah, it's not a motive. It's a hobby at the moment.
Awesome, Jason. Thank you so much for acknowledging our listeners and just opening eyes on football behind the scenes. Thank you, Jason. It was great to have you.
Okay, buddy. Yeah, I appreciate it. Thank you.